I usually roll the R's, Carrie.
Hey, welcome back. We're here again behind the why, looking at this whole idea of ministry and school, and just going to look with my friend Carrie. Who's going to talk about her experience and just getting out of the house and going and experience what God has for her. Talking about being a young lady coming up and then making the decisions you did and what that path took you to and how it looks. What do you say?
Sounds good.
Let's go do it. Let's see what God has to say about it. You ready? Let's go. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Get us started.
Okay. Well, my name's Carrie Goldsmith. I grew up here in Nampa, but I've been kind of a vagabond traveler.
Okay.
I went to Northwest Nazarene University here, and then I was like, I got to get out of my hometown.
All right.
So so my first career was in education. So I got a teaching job in California, and then taught in Bakersfield for 3 years.
Wait, you taught in Bakersfield? Tell me about that. Come on, what grade level did you teach in Bakersfield?
What did you say?
What grade level in Bakersfield?
So my first year of teaching was fourth grade.
Okay.
And it was not a good year.
Come on, tell me about that. Let's bring us inside. We got a brand new, you coming up from here, Treasure Valley, Idaho. You going to Bakersfield, California, you're teaching. Take us through that experience. Talk to me about it.
It was, man, this is a long time ago.
At least 3 weeks, right? At least 3 weeks ago. So,
it was a low income school, which I was real excited about. I'm like, oh, I can like be a great example for them. But I felt like I was prepared, but I think my biggest problem was that I felt like if I asked questions that would show that I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
But like everyone knows that first year teachers don't really know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that at the time. So like I should have just been asking like millions of questions to everyone.
Okay.
But I was like, oh, I got to do it on my own. And so it was very challenging, and just like classroom management isn't like my best thing anyway. There were a lot of things.
So let me see. Cause now this was your first job teaching.
Yes.
You've gone through the 4 years of school. Now you've gone in. You did your. Did you do that? What did you do? Your was it the intern? Your.
Yeah, I did my student teaching, and that went really well.
And that was here.
That was here in Nampa.
And then you got hired down in Bakersfield. Now here's the question. I like to pull the curtain back. Let's get behind the why. Right. Let's get behind the why. And here's the question I have for you. In this year, that you were there for a year.
1 year.
In this year in Bakersfield, fourth grade, first job on your own, where was God in this?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was everywhere. Even though it was, I mean, probably because it was such a hard year,
Right.
I like had to depend on God completely. And thankfully I had a really great church there. And
Good.
and I got involved with the teens. So like everything at church was great. Volunteering with the teens, and I was in the church choir, and like I said, like because school was so challenging, I really had to like stay close to God through all of this.
I want to reach inside your head and take one of those memories. Okay.
Oh gosh.
Take me to that night, because we all have that night when you're there and you are on the bottom.
Yeah.
And you're crying because you feel like you're saying to yourself, did I do the right thing?
Oh, yeah.
Now tell me about where you were there. Because I'll tell you, I remember my entire life, from 12 years old, I sent my first up card to the Marine Corps when I was 12 because I wanted to be a Marine. And so they sent me a letter back saying, hey, you're too young. Wait till you turn 18. So I finally turned 18. I'm off to the Marine Corps, right? And I'm telling you my night. That night, I'm sitting there. We had reception, which is a whole nightmare in and of itself. And I'm laying there on the bunk, and I'm saying to myself, did I make a mistake? And I remember meeting God in that chaos, because it was crazy, throwing trash cans around, tipping beds over. And I remember standing back against the wall going, Lord, did I make a mistake? And just in the middle of that storm, just that little piece that God said, I'm with you. Settle everything now. So that's the night. Give me that night. Tell me what happened in Carrie's heart and head that said, you're going to be all right.
Man, well, first when you were mentioning the night, I was first imagining this. There might have been more than one, but I remember one.
I'm sure there was.
I think it was like lunchtime or something at school, sometime where there was a break and there weren't kids in my class. And it was like just a horrible day. And I remember like leaning up against the cabinets where you like can't see in if someone looked in the windows, and like just sitting on the floor and just crying and like what other careers could I have? I just went through 4 years of school for this, and it's horrible. And I can't actually remember like in that moment, like, you know, God doing a big work in me, but it's more like now looking back that I see
hindsight being what it is.
He gave me strength to get through it, and then provided another job after that there in Bakersfield, because I didn't feel ready to leave yet after just 1 year there. And then like because of that job, so I worked at a Christian school for a couple of years, and then we ended up going to Hume Lake Christian camps for this outdoor science camp with the 6th and 7th graders. And then anyway, so through that, I ended up actually moving to Hume Lake. And so it was like...
Now, Hume Lake, where is that?
So that's in California.
Okay.
It is
I
in the
remember
Sierra
the name,
Nevadas,
I can't remember what it was. Okay.
Just outside of Kings Canyon National Park.
Okay.
So it's beautiful.
I'll say beautiful country.
And they actually they're so remote that they have their own charter school there. And so they have teachers there, which I had no idea. And so I ended up, like, I was there for outdoor ed. And I was like, I went to the office and just asked, like, do you guys have jobs here? Like, I love it here. And they said, oh, we're actually looking for a teacher. And I was like, you have a school here? And then I ended up getting the job teaching 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade all in one class.
See, look at that.
So, like, I look back and I'm like, if that first year hadn't been so horrible, and actually I'd end up not getting rehired at the school. It's like, if I hadn't lost my job there, I wouldn't have gone to, like, the Christian school, because it paid a lot less. Right. But it was like the job, like my one job offer. Right. So like if I hadn't gone there, then I wouldn't have ended up at Hume, which was like such an amazing experience.
See, and the reason I ask you that, because one of the things I run into a lot, especially when I'm talking to Christians, will say things like, you know, you need to press into God. You need to get to know God, because this whole thing of Christianity is really, as Jesus said in the Gospel of John, when he's talking about eternal life, he said, this is eternal life, that they may know you and know me, the Christ. And so we talk about this idea of having a relationship with God. And so many times I'll talk to especially a young believer, and they're like, well, how do you do that? How do you get to know God? And it's through this process. It's this experience of life that God reveals himself to us, and he'll bring us to those circumstances, those situations. And the question to you and I and all of us at any given time in our life is, which way will we turn? Yeah. You see, and that's the point. We find ourselves pressed, and pressed is about the best word, because we're so stupid that we would choose wrong given half the chance. You know, that's human nature. We'll you got nieces and nephews, and you watch them as they grow up, when they're little, especially when they're little, you watch them make choices that you know is bad. Yeah. But they do it anyway because they want to, because it seems fun. And we would love to believe that tendency just disappears, but it doesn't. It just gets more complicated. So as we're going through life, what we find is that God will often put us in those situations where we wind up at a Hume Lake, where we never would have chosen that to start. Never would have said, send me there. You know, I remember when I got out of the Marine Corps, I wound up selling water door to door because of a similar situation. It was like, I got a family. I got to do a job. And all of a sudden, here I am selling water door to door. Okay, didn't do well for my pride, which was probably a good thing, but I had to make that decision. So now we're in Hume Lake. Where do we go from there?
So I ended up teaching there for 3 years and working. Working at their camp during the summers. And Ryan, my brother, am I allowed to talk about Ryan?
Hi, Ryan, my brother. I don't know.
Right over there.
Do we want to talk about him? I don't know. He may be feeling guilty, so don't bring that up.
He came up a couple summers.
Okay.
So that was kind of fun. Actually, that was kind of fun because he's 5 years younger than me. But when we worked at Hume, we were on the same level and we had the same friends. And I think that was when we really became friends.
Right.
Like, so that, I don't know. I feel like that was special for us.
You say that because this is one of those things we take for granted, with siblings, that siblings, like everyone else, they have to have the same journey to friendship. You're not automatically friends because you have the same parents. My older brother and I, we're buddies, but when we were younger, because there is a big age difference, between us, is that we hung out in the same circle, but on different ends of it. Mm-hmm. And so when I got to be a senior high school student and he was away in college, and when he came back, we began to bond as friends because we got to know each other. Instead of just being my brother, he became Jim and I became Ray. We became buddies. We hung out together. And that was something that we really hadn't done as pals, And my middle brother and I, we were so close together. We played together all the time and went all through high school together. But my older brother, we had to become friends. Mm-hmm. And so I think that can be missed a lot in this journey. God has given us the model of the family where the basic building blocks of life are taught, because that's what he uses to tell the world about who he is. Mm-hmm. As a parent, you're looking at your child, you get to reflect the Father God heart. Mm-hmm. And then as a child growing up, you see this Father heart God. And then you start to put all these pieces together, and it's like this big collage that we get, and we learn relationship.
All these different images of God, since we can't ever fully grasp God, right. He gives us these images in our life.
And it has to be that way, because someone would say, if we could cipher God, then we would have to be greater than him. So we can't figure him out. He has to reveal himself to us, and he uses all these mechanisms. Mm-hmm. So when you say that time when Ryan followed you up there and you couldn't get away from him no matter how hard you tried.
No, I loved that he came. I think I told him to come.
That's where a relationship begins, though. That's where relationship begins. And it's the same thing with God. So now we're here. We got little brother, you got growing relationships. So seeing God is adding layers to you. Okay, let's go ahead on, Miss Carrie. Let's go.
And being there helped me become a lot more adventurous, because you're just in this like adventurous environment, and learn to deal with like things like bugs in nature, because I'm living at this camp, and because I feel like this comes into play later in life.
Okay.
Just an element of discomfort in some ways anyway, and learning to be a bit more spontaneous and flexible. That's an ongoing.
So this was not you previous to this. You're not spontaneous?
No. I'm more of a planner.
Okay. Everything has a list, and a list for the list. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Something like that. Okay. But I think just being at Hume helped in that journey of being at least a little more.
She's checking over to see if Ryan's going to go, no. Veto that last one. No.
Yeah, I've got like a truth checker.
Okay. We have to check our facts. Oh, we're good. All right. So now we're coming up with through Hume. We're growing. We're getting used to bugs and all these good things. And so another layer. What's happening now?
I got kind of tired of being in the bubble there. As much as I loved Hume, like it's far away from like civilization, and I wanted a break from teaching. So I ended up moving back here to Nampa and worked as a service coordinator, kind of a social work in the social work field for a couple of years.
With which agency was that?
Unbefuddled. We helped kids with disabilities, helped them, like worked with their families to get like services that they needed. Okay. So we were kind of like middlemen. It was a nice break from teaching, very different. Okay. And I just feel like it was just kind of like a breather for me. All right. And then for years I had felt God like leading me to like missions, or like at least to like, I knew I wanted to live overseas at some point. Okay. I didn't know what that would look like, and just felt like that it was time, like felt God saying like, it's time. So then I started really looking for opportunities, mostly like teaching. And I was still paying off my undergrad student loans, so I wanted something that paid. Right. There were a lot of places that you had to raise your own support, and I was like, nah. So anyway, long story short, I ended up moving to Indonesia to teach 3rd and 4th grade English at a Christian school in Surabaya, Indonesia.
And you were there how long?
So my initial contract was for 2 years, but I ended up staying 4 years.
Oh.
So going back to Hume, like learning to be like a little uncomfortable and bugs and nature and stuff, I felt like kind of helped prepare me for like the giant bugs that I encountered in Indonesia and like the major discomfort and like some of those other things. It's like, I don't know. I just look back and I see God preparing me like for the next step, or sometimes it's not until like a few steps later or something.
Right.
Through like all these
now
different
in Indonesia,
experiences.
were you in a predominantly Christian community?
At my school, but I mean,
Because the community at large is Muslim, right?
Yeah.
So how
so
was
it's
that?
mostly Muslim.
You, a single female living abroad, away from home. How was that? Tell me about that experience.
Oh, I mean, there's
How was
so
that living
much.
in the Muslim world?
You know, it was fine. Like the Muslims generally, well, I mean, there are some more extremist
People
there, but like in general, like the general just everyday people that you come across are all very peaceful and like just happy to let everyone live their own lives. Like and they were usually excited to meet a white person, like because like sometimes people would just like come up to me and like just want to take my picture. Like, and they would always ask me where I'm from, and Obama was the president then, and he lived in Indonesia for a while. So when I would tell them America, they're like, "Oh, America, Obama, yeah." So I was like, "Yeah."
Very cool.
And so that actually helped, you know, my time there. But I don't know. I'm trying to think I don't think I ever really felt unsafe. There was one time where they told us not to leave like our side of the city because there were some demonstrations going on. Like that would happen every once in a while. But I don't know. Like all the Muslim people I met were just
here we go
very
again.
friendly.
I'm going to reach in. I need a night. Give me one. Give me one special night out of that 4 years. Let's pull it out and look at it. Come on. Give me that one night that you had to say this was the day or the pivotal point of my time in Indonesia. What would that look like?
I remember this was just after my first year. I was at this, it's funny, they call it a camp, but it was only one night. We worked, so all 4 years that I was there, I helped with this ministry called Kembang Kuning, which was actually just the name of the cemetery where we had the ministry. So as Christians, there's only certain places where we could actually do ministry because like the Muslims could just be like, no, you can't do that here.
Right.
And so this was like a Christian cemetery or Christian part of the cemetery. Okay. And so we could meet there freely. And there were a lot of poor people that lived around there. So we would do this Saturday, like VBS kind of Sunday school thing and give them food at the end. And so we would do like a lesson and a skit and crafts and games. And I would usually go once a month. And my first year was just on a team, and then after that, I ended up leading a team. I still don't know how. Like, it was like all of a sudden I was a team leader. I was like, how did this happen?
Availability makes those things happen.
Indonesian. But so there were some teens that we worked with through that group, and we did this one night camp. It's now like a much longer camp. It's grown into this huge, amazing program with the people that run it there. But I remember being at this camp, and I was so tired. I think I was in charge of games for that camp, and it was so hot. I was so sweaty, and we were worn out. And I remember like laying down on the ground in this building, and I was like, "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be right now." I just had this like peace and joy, even though I was like hot and sweaty and exhausted, and it was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. And I don't know, that was, I'm sure, one of many moments, but it was like, yeah, actually most of the time I went to Kembang Kuning, I was hot, sweaty, uncomfortable.
Kind of goes with being in the tropics, right?
Yes, but then would feel like this is where I'm supposed to be.
I remember one time when I was in Japan, I was still in the Marine Corps, and we went out on this ministry trip, and I got asked to come, and I didn't really want to do it. It was one of those days where want to do something else. And I got asked to go, and we got to this orphanage, and it wasn't the good orphanage. It was the orphanage where kids were that nobody wanted. So these kids were spastic and deformed to various degrees. But I remember meeting this one little boy, and he spoke Japanese, of course, and I spoke English, and so we had a hard time communicating. But I just remember he had this brace on his legs that he kind of walked waddling because he couldn't really walk. But he was so happy. He would say, he point at himself and say, like, love Jesus. He loved Jesus. You love Jesus? Yeah. And he was like, he gets so happy, And I remember just being there. Well, so I said, I had to agree. I'll only stay an hour, and it's like 2 hours, 2.5 hours later. And we're there with the kids, and we're just in this moment. And you realize that this is life because you're sharing with these kids, and you think of yourself as going to give so much to them, and you realize that, no, you're getting a bigger part of this. And I remember several weeks after that, the nurses, not nurse, but what do you call it? The nuns who had set this up sent me a photograph that they had taken of me with this boy, and it was in a newspaper. And I just remember looking at that picture going, Lord, this is such a humbling moment because I got so much more. Because you look at this little kid's face, and he has like this little kid Christmas morning look on his face, like this is like the best day of my life, And I just remember thinking, this is life. This is ministry. This is the body of Christ coming together in one of those moments that only God can make happen. And it's one of those things that I would not have done. I would not have done it. I just wasn't feeling like it that day. I didn't want to do it that day. I was tired. Whatever the excuse was, my flesh was like, no.
Yeah.
But I felt, for whatever reason, I couldn't say no that time. And it wasn't a good show. I mean, like I literally couldn't say no. The nuns were like, come on. And the girl I was working with, Chrissy, who was the chaplain's assistant, like, get in the bus, Ray, and stop fussing. And I was like, oh. And I got there and just totally fell in love with this kid. So it's another one of those moments. I'm saying that God always has those moments in your life if you just give it to him. Just give it to him. There's so many things that bring. So now we're 4 years in Indonesia. What brought you back to the States?
Well, I mean,
my daughters.
Well, that's true. My little nieces were 1.5 years at that time.
Okay.
So that was part of it.
Well, they are pretty special. I got to say so myself. They're pretty special little girls. So.
They are. Yeah, Ryan, it was not very fair. He's like, Capri and Isabel really want you to move back. I'm like, they don't even know me. They're 1.5 years.
He goes, and that would be my point.
It's true. Yes, actually, that was a part of it. Every year, I mean, so I had my 2 years. And so after the 2 years and then the next year, it was always like, okay, what am I saying? Am I going? And just always this prayer. But after the 2 years and the 3 years, I just felt like my time there wasn't finished yet. I was, just felt like, and really the main thing that kept me there was I got involved with the teens at my church. And that was really like where my heart was. Right. The teaching was just kind of there. Like, I loved my kids that I taught too, but that was more like my reason. Like, it gave me the visa, it gave me a paycheck, but like my heart was with my teens at my church. Right. But yeah, I loved my kids too. But anyway,
this is one of the things, and this is kind of a rabbit trail, but this is one of the things we look at is, and just you just made me think about this when you said that God is not opposed to his children making a living. I mean, he created the systems, so he's not opposed to it. And I think where the problem comes is when twofold. One is when we are so focused on that we don't see him. We don't trust him because now we're in charge. When Jesus said in the Gospels, look at the birds of the field, and not one sparrow falls to the ground without your Father knowing it. The plants in the field, they're gathered in a burn, and yet your Father dresses them. He says, don't worry about where you're going to sleep, what you're going to eat. Your Father knows you have need of these things. So it's not that God has a problem with us making a living. It's when we depend on that living more than we do him, because now it blinds us to what he has in store for us. Because if the world and Satan can get us so focused on making a living, then guess what we're not doing? We're not focused on serving him. And so I can applaud the fact that the job took you to a place of ministry, but what's greater out of that is that ministry happened. That's what's beautiful. It's not, so I hear people say, and I brought that up because I hear people talk about that all the time, and I think we get that confused in the church. Money is never the problem. Getting a job is never the problem. It doesn't matter. I mean, what job are you going to have that's going to matter 500 years from now? You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. What matters is, did Miss Carrie do what God told her to do? That's what it comes down to. And so we have to look at that in the big picture. So I just wanted to bring that out, not necessarily about anything you said, but I just know in conversations I've had with other people, and perhaps someone's listening who have really been having that battle. And it's like, no, do you. Do what God has put in your heart to do. I had this conversation with my son once. We were talking about serving the Lord. And I just asked him point blank, I said, do you honestly think that the person who created you with your passions, your desires, your dreams, he put all that in you, he doesn't know how to place you in this life? And he looked at me. I said, it's the devil that causes us to fear God. If I give my life to God, he's going to send me to Indonesia. Well, if you go to Indonesia, guess what? That's where you ought to be, right? Hot, sweaty, and nasty, laying on the floor going, this is exactly where I need to be. Because that's what God does, right? I mean, that's what he does. He knows us. I mean, gosh, he fashioned us. It's not like he got around to getting to know you. He made you.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool when we can trust him like that.
Yeah.
So now we're on the big magic plane. Ryan has guilted you back to the States because that's the job of the baby brother, to make you feel sad. So he's got you back. Now what?
So actually that in like April, maybe, of that last school year that I was there, we had this, I think it was like a week-long prayer focus. Anyway, we had services every night and a special speaker at church. Excuse me. And it was during that I felt God calling me to go back to school for ministry.
Okay.
So my undergrad's in elementary ed and music, and then I actually have a master's in education. But I've always been like drawn to ministry. I've often thought about missions and like prayed about if that's what God is calling me to. But in that moment, it wasn't like a call to a specific like job or task. It was like, I felt like I was supposed to go back to school. So I was like, okay, Lord, but you have to pay for it. Because I had like just paid off my undergrad loans and I did not want to go back into debt for school.
I can relate to that. Trust me. So now you went back, you had your undergrad in education and music?
Yeah, minor in music.
So that means you're going to sing for us before we're done today?
Sure. My throat's feeling a little scratchy, but I can always sing.
I think I feel a song coming on. All right. So you said, you said, okay, Lord, if you lead me, provide, right?
Yeah.
I can feel that.
So I started looking for jobs. I started looking for school programs. Then I ended up taking a teaching job back in Nampa.
Okay.
So I ended up coming back. And it's pretty funny because my first year of teaching was 4th grade in a public school. Right. And then what ended up being my last year of teaching was 4th grade in a public school.
Parenthesis. Okay, we got it.
And they were both like my worst years of teaching. And I taught for 11 years. The 9 like in between were good.
Okay. So note to self, stay away from 4th grade. Okay, I got you. We got you. Now, see, it's funny. You say that you felt like the Lord had led you back to education. This is the funny thing about me. Growing up in the Black community in the South, education was something that was really important. It was just what you did. It was because education and opportunity had been denied to us as Blacks at that time through all the things that have, thank God, have moved on since then. But I remember, and after I got into felt my call to the ministry, and even on a professional level, I kept trying to go back to school because I felt like I was supposed to. And I kept trying several times going to college. I got units, credits, never got a degree, but I got like 60, 80 credits, units, whatever it comes
You have
somewhere.
the knowledge, at least.
I got credits out my ears. But, several times I've gone to school, and because I wanted to go, I felt like I was supposed to go, like it was necessary. But God kept directing me away from it. And I remember talking to my wife one time about that, and she was like, well, you just feel like you got to go because one of my brothers got his doctorate. And he's like, and he's like, I'm like, and it was realized, I'm like, well, maybe it's pride. I don't know. But the Lord was doing a work in my life, and he's continued that work that has not taken that same path that I thought was so necessary. So again, we see that once we surrender our lives to the Lord, he knows what he has for us. We just got to trust him with it. We got to trust him with it. And it's on one hand, go to school. On my side, literally, no.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, at least 4 or 5 different occasions where I tried to go to school, whether it was online or whether it was pursuing a psychology degree or a law enforcement or a degree, or just, and every time God said no. And it's like, okay. Finally, I said, okay. What got me the last time was my oldest son. I came home from work, dropped my bags, changed my clothes, and was heading to class. And he literally grabbed me. He was like 2.5 years old. And he grabbed me, and he said, you go again?
Aww.
And I said, oh, and I remember kneeling down, because I get down to eye level, right? Because that's what you do with children, right? And I'm going to talk to him. I said, Daddy, go to school so I can get a degree, so I can make a better living for you, and Mom, because we only had the one baby at the time. And he's sucking his 2 fingers. And he pulls his finger, and he goes, when are we going to play? And I said, Daddy has to go to school. He goes, but when are we going to play? And my wife said, he's been waiting for you all day.
Oh.
And I said, oh, I'll be back soon. And I went to class that day, and I'm sitting there in a required class on art history, art theory, or something stupid like that. And the segment was on modern art, which I think is an excuse for people without talent. Anyway, and all I can hear in my head was my son's voice. When are we going to play? And so I closed the book, and I walked up, and I said, I need to be excused. And she said, oh, I'll see you next week. I said, no, I don't think so. She goes, what? She said, but you're doing so well. I said, I know, I just got something more important I got to do. So I went home, and I opened the front door, and he was so happy to see me. My wife goes, what's going on? I said, I'm not going to do the degree. And she goes, are you sure? And I said, I think this is more important. She goes, I think you made the right choice. And so I got on the floor and played with my son. So it was one, and I would love to say to you that was the last time that I felt that bug that I had to finish my degree. But there was at least 2 more attempts that I tried before I finally listened to the Lord and said no. So, but it's about being led by the Lord. And that's that key point. So I'm looking at these key points in your life because it's a fascinating story to hear. But at the same time, I'm sure there's somebody going, well, the thing I'm doing right now just doesn't make any sense. The answer is give it to God. Give it to God and let him have it. And I guarantee you, you may be in the dungeon right now, but there's a job promotion coming just like it was for Joseph. So just keep on hanging on.
Yeah. And like, you never know what, whatever job or whatever you're doing right now, you might be learning that's actually going to help you in the next thing that like might make more sense or, it's
exactly. I mean, I can look at my life right now. I remember when I was a child, I told you I wanted to be a Marine at 12.
Yeah.
When I was in 5th grade, I discovered the martial arts. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I was made for. So I wanted to be a professional martial artist. I trained. That's all I wanted to do. And I just knew that was going to be my life, that of a professional martial artist. I was going to join the Marine Corps, go to the Orient, train, fight for a living. I loved everything about it. I mean, I was not a guy who did martial arts. I was a martial artist. That was a distinct difference, And then once I really surrendered my life to the Lord, it was like, oh, I can't. Where I was at in my life, I couldn't dedicate the 3-4 hours a day to train the way I was doing because of other things that were going on. And I thought, okay, I got to make a sacrifice here. And so I was like, Lord, I made a conscious decision. Okay, Lord, I'm going to give this to you for now. I still train, but not to the degree where I could be at that level of proficiency. But I remember much later on now, I became a deputy sheriff, and all of a sudden I found myself part of the martial arts team for the Orange County Sheriff's Department.
Oh, wow.
Then I found myself the captain of the martial arts team. I don't know, it just happened, like you say. And I realized about a year or two in this that here I was literally doing the job of a professional martial artist. I was getting paid to train. I was getting paid to do martial arts performances and train other people in martial arts. All my gear was paid for.
Whoa.
I was fully sponsored. And I was like, God gave me that dream after I had surrendered it to him. And so even though you don't see how all these things tie together, I say that again because you look at these situations and you say, wow, I don't know where it's going. Every dream I've had, whether it was in painting, there was a time I said, Lord, I really want to be an artist. And there was a period of my life where I literally made a lot of money in a short spurt, painting.
Wow.
And I was like, that's cool. People paid me for my paintings. I'm like, I can deal with that.
Yeah.
And then the last thing was childhood dreams I had to surrender to the Lord was to be a writer. I wanted to be a writer. And I surrendered to the Lord because of other things. And then fast forward in my life in 2013, I had my first book published. And now we're 5 books down the road. I'm like, so everything that I felt like I had to surrender to God, he then gave back. And so, again, I look at your journey and I'm thinking, yeah, here we are. We've come from, I got to go here. I'm going to go to Bakersfield, to Hume Lake, to Indonesia, and now we're still on this journey. We're not finished with your journey yet, but I want to just insert that because I just really feel like there's somebody today who's listening to us is going to be trying to make that decision whether or not we should continue to give it to God. And the answer is yes, keep giving it to God because there's a whole lot of room between, okay, I'm going to give it up, to, wow, look what God did. Sometimes that's several years down the road, but it pays out. I lived a little while longer, so I've been able to see some of those things come to pass. So we're back now. We're back to Miss Carrie.
Although I do feel like we shouldn't pass over the martial artist thing too quickly. If I'm singing, you need to do like a demonstration. Can you chop something in half? Or
it has been, it's been great. I've just, again, everything that I have given to the Lord, he has given back. Someone once told me that you can't outgive God and God is no man's debtor. And there is nothing that I've surrendered to God that God did not return to me 100-fold. And I really literally say that because I look at my life and those two things defined me as a child and young adult was art and martial arts. Those are two things that defined my life. And in surrendering those to God, everything came full circle. And so, yes, working as a martial artist and getting paid for it by the Orange County Sheriff's Department, and then working as a law enforcement officer, it has served me well over time, And then, like I said, the art itself, being able to use that and reaching out to children's groups and different things when I do public speaking, I'll use some of my own art sometime to talk about that. And so things like that. So nothing ever goes to waste with God. Nothing ever goes to waste. He uses it all for his glory if we'll just give it to him.
Yeah.
And so we come back, and I want to finish with you since we got to bring this plane to a landing. So if you were going to wrap this up and put it in a nutshell, the Carrie story, tell us, bring us up to where you are now and what do you see going forward?
Yeah. So now we'll skip ahead a few years. And I actually tomorrow I'm graduating with my master's in pastoral ministry.
I got to give a round of applause for that.
So let's see. So it's 2019. So 2013 was when I felt God calling me to go back to school.
My first book was published 2013. See, it was a good year.
Yeah.
It was a very good year.
So now 6 years later, getting my master's, and I'm now working as an associate pastor at a church in Renton.
Which I found out today is actually in Washington.
Yes, just outside of
I was thinking
Seattle.
it was in Oregon for whatever reason. Today I found out it's actually in Washington.
In Washington, yes. And so I'm the family pastor. So I'm kind of like the youth pastor, children's pastor, community outreach pastor, all rolled into one. It's a small church. So I'm like, so I've been there almost 3 years, and I've just been constantly learning and growing, learning what it means to be a pastor. And
so you got over that fear of asking questions, huh?
Hopefully somewhat. I could probably ask more, actually. That's a good point. But I think I'm not as worried about, people like needing to know everything. I'm just like, I don't know anything, guys. I need all the help I can get.
But we know the one who does, right? We know the one who does.
Yes. So I think I am over that. But I guess, like, as I look back on my life so far, like I said earlier, I just see how, like, kind of like you said, how nothing is wasted. Like, all these different experiences, good and bad and wonderful and horrible, and have all helped make me who I am today, and have helped give me the different skills and talents for what God is calling me to do right now. And I'm sure, like, what I'm doing now is going to help with whatever the future might hold. And I don't know what it is going to be, but I just want to be faithful with what God has given me now, and not constantly be like looking towards what's next and like, oh, what am I going to do next? What's the next change going to be? Because I have moved so much that in some ways I feel like that's one of my problems, is like, I'm not just like where I am now and like focused on that. But I think, like, right now I'm finally like not looking towards what's next. I'm like, what's next in my current context? Like, what is God calling our church to be, and what's my role in that? And how can I reach this community that's right around my church, that we've got thousands of people right around our church, and most of them don't go to church. And a lot of people are very anti-church, or at least anti-God, and anti like established, religion, like
it's like Jesus said in John 17, right? To know him. Not the establishment, but to really know him. If you know him, everything else comes into place. So I guess we, in observance our big boss over there, we better bring this plane into a lane. But I thank you very much for spending this, last 10, 15 minutes talking with us as we've explored this walk back down memory lane as we are launching ourselves forward. So thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
We'll have to get you back on the mic one of these days. And for all you guys watching and listening, remember, like and subscribe, and come on, join in the conversation. Send us some comments there. We'll answer you back, and we'll keep you in prayer. Until then, God bless you. Peace.